Before starting the demo, I will quickly introduce myself. I am Vinod. I have been teaching different data engineering technologies since last 6 years, like Snowflake, DBT, Matillion, Airflow, etc. I have around 15 years of experience in the data engineering area. I worked on different technologies. So that is a quick introduction about myself. Okay. So let me just quickly go through about the DBT. So try to understand what is DBT, then maybe in the subsequent sessions you will understand more about it. Okay. So generally, if you see in the ETL process, right? Generally, as a data engineer or as a, database developer and different roles, what we do generally, right? We do a extraction, transformation, and loading. These are the main three parts we do, right? We will be having different sources, right? Like databases, APIs, SFTP servers, or different applications, right? So we will be getting the data from different source systems, and that data will be staged in some temporary staging area. So where you'll consolidate all the data from different sources and you'll put it there, okay? And you will transform the data, okay? So just say whatever the data you are getting from your sources is raw data. Now you are going to transform the data, you are going to model the data, and then you are going to store it in the data warehouse. So this was the process for ETL: extract the data, transform it, and load it into the data warehouse. And once you load the data into the data warehouse, this one will be used for reporting and data science purposes. Okay, so this was like a previous trend. This is not the current design pattern, but this ETL process was a previous trend. So where your transformation used to happen outside of your data warehouse. Okay, now the trend has changed into ELT. Okay, extraction, load, and transformation. Okay, so what does that mean? So now the transformation will be happening on your data warehouse itself. So let me show you the diagram. So you have the sources, you have this, and you do the transformation, and the data will be loaded into the data warehouse, right? So now what is the problem with this approach? One thing is you are only loading the transformed data into the data warehouse, right? Your raw data is not available. So whenever I say raw data, right, the as it is data that is coming from the sources is not available in the data warehouse. For example, the source data as it is, data science team wants to access it, you don't have the access through data warehouse here. Okay, so that is one problem with this ETL approach. Okay, and another thing is, as the time evolved, these data warehouses became capable enough doing this particular transformation within the warehouse. Okay, so you don't need any third party transformation tools here. So for example, if you consider Informatica Power Center, so transformations will happen in Informatica engine itself. Okay, and then data will be loaded here. But now the trend has changed here. The transformation part is getting shifted to your data warehouse here, because your data warehouse itself is powerful to do all these transformations. So now the trend has changed from ETL to ELT. So here you extract the data first and you load the data into the data warehouse, and then you transform inside the data warehouse. Now, where does DBT comes into picture in all this particular pipeline, we can say? In the extraction, loading, transformation, DBT only focuses on the transformation part. Okay, so only focuses on the transformation. Or if you take Informatica IACS or Matillion or any other ETL tool, they do extraction, loading, transformation. All the three things they will do, right? But DBT is only focused on the transformation part. Okay, and extraction and loading can be done with the different tools. Okay, so maybe Fivetran is one tool that most probably used with DBT. Okay, you can use different data loading tools for extraction and loading, but DBT is only concerned with the transformation. Okay, so now you might get a doubt, like when there are other tools which are doing entire ELT process, extraction, load, transformation, why there is a special tool for transformation, right? So you have Informatica which is doing all the three things. Why should I go for DBT, right? So that could be one of your questions, correct? So for that, I have chosen some of the main features of DBT which will make DBT different from other existing tools like Informatica. So to make you understand clearly, so this DBT is only for transformation. Okay, it's not for any of the other tools equivalent tool. Okay, so for example, let's take Informatica or Matillion. So this is like a ETL tool. Okay, so DBT, it's not a complete ETL tool. Okay, and if you take any data loading tool, I was telling you, right? So you have Oracle Golden Gate. Actually, it's Quick Loader. So also Fivetran. So all these things are only suitable for data loading. So DBT is not for data loading. Okay, and if you take Power BI or Tableau, this is only for data visualization. Okay, so DBT is not a visualization tool also. Okay, so what is DBT then? So DBT is only your transformation tool. Okay, only the T part of ELT will be taken care by DBT effectively. Okay, so that is what your DBT is. Okay, now let us try to understand what are the special features of DBT, why we use DBT for exclusively for transformation. Okay, so now the first thing is what can DBT do for my data pipeline. So when you are building the data pipeline from the sources to your target system, so what DBT will help. Okay, so one is code deployment. Okay, so for example, if you are a Java developer or if you are a .NET developer or full stack developer, there are lot of automation in the code deployment. Okay, so for example, as soon as a Java developer write the code, they will upload the code into a version control tool. Okay, so does anyone know what is a version control tool? It is one of the example of version control tool, right? So you can write your code and you can maintain all your versions in the Git here. Okay, so what a developer will do in the application world is they write the code and they put the code into your GitHub repository, and then as soon as you push the code, there will be some automations will happen. For example, all the tests that will run against your code, and it will tell you where your code is broken. Okay, if the test is not passing with your new code, it will tell you the test is not passing, right? And similar way, the code first it will be deployed it into the higher environments. Okay, once the test is passed, it is going to push the code into your test environment or production environment. Okay, so this is called CI/CD. Okay, continuous integration and continuous development. Okay, so this particular process is there in the application world. Okay, if you are a full stack developer, this there are a lot of good practices they follow. Okay, but whereas as a data engineer, what I used to do, I remember I used to send my code files. Okay, we used to send my code files to someone called a database administrator. Okay, so as a data engineer or database developer, like 6 to 7 years back, I used to send my code and they will execute that code and send me back the result. Okay, this is long back. Okay, but now also there are some automation happened, but this when you compare it to the application development, right? So this data engineering is still little bit lagging in the your code deployment and testing process, right? So what your DBT will do is it will allow you to use the version control tool. Okay, so you cannot create a DBT project without a version control tool. So first of all, version control tool is mandatory. Okay, so that is one thing. The second thing is it also makes us to deploy your code changes automatically to the higher environments. Okay, so and also it will allow you to perform some tests on your DBT SQL code and it will promote it to the next level environment. Okay, so that is the advantage of DBT when compared to other tools. Okay, you have your version control, you have testing, and you have deployment pipelines. Okay, so that is one thing. Okay, and the second thing is you can do automated data validation. Okay, so what is this automated data validation? For example, if you take OLTP database. Okay, so by the way, does anyone know what is an OLTP database? Where we use it? What is the full form of OLTP? Transaction processing, right? So in my initial, if I show my diagram, like where we have done this particular sources part. Okay, so generally the OLTP databases will be sitting here. So these databases are designed for small volume of data, but reading and writing that small volume of data is really faster. Okay, so these are called OLTP databases. If you consider Oracle, Postgres, MySQL, SQL Server, these databases comes under OLTP. Okay, so they are designed for holding small volume of current data, but the transaction will happen really faster within seconds to milliseconds. Okay, and whereas this data warehouse is called OLAP, like Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, right? These are also databases, but these systems are designed for huge volumes of historical data. Okay, so once the data is getting older, they will be moved from here to here, right? So these are called OLAP systems. Okay, so generally in the OLTP systems, there are a lot of constraints, right? So for example, you take primary key, foreign key, check constraint, unique key, not null, default, right? But whereas you take any of the current modern data warehouse like Snowflake or BigQuery, right? Or any of the different data warehouses that does not support this particular constraints. Okay, so why OLAP is not supporting these constraints? When you are getting the data from your source system, OLTP system, into your data warehouse, if you keep a primary key constraint, it has to check whether that particular row is unique to compare with every other row. While loading the data over the network, the load process will be slowed down. right? So generally they don't support these kind of constraints on the data warehouse. Okay, but once you load the data, I wanted to check my data quality, whether everything is good, the primary keys are there, unique or not null, right? So that can be done by combining with DBT. Okay, so you can enforce your primary key foreign key checks. That means once data is loaded into your data warehouse, right? So you can check your constraints, right? And you can see whether your data quality is good or not. Okay, not only this existing constraints. For example, let's say I have a table where I have sales data, right? And I wanted to check whether my sales revenue is negative or not. Okay, so if it is negative, I wanted to fail the test. Okay, I wanted always my revenue should be positive. Okay, so now I wanted to implement that business rule as a test, right? So that is also possible with DBT. So not only your existing constraints that are there on OLTP, you can also implement your business rules as a test. Okay, so the data testing is also automated using DBT. Okay, so you can check all your data quality here, and you can check your data quality on your raw data as well as your curated data. So what does it mean by raw data and curated data? Okay, so I will show you. Same thing, this is an ETL process. Okay, you will get the data from different sources. Okay, and you will be loading the data into a data warehouse like Snowflake. Okay, and here the data that you get from your sources is called raw data. Okay, that is in the same format as your sources. Okay, now we will use DBT to transform this data into curated layer. Okay, so for example, I'm getting sales data at day level. Okay, now I wanted to convert this data at month level or year level or quarter level. I wanted to do some aggregation, or I wanted to remove the duplicates from raw data and put it in the curated layer, right? So all these things can be done through DBT, right? So now I wanted to check my testing on the raw data as well as curated data. So I can define a test saying whether my raw data is good or not. Okay, so one test will be run. If raw data is really good, I will go for transformation. Okay, and then once I transform the data, again I will have a one more check whether my curated data is good or not. So if my curated data is satisfying my quality, I will share with my maybe the reporting team and data science team, right? So you can check your quality on the raw data as well as curated data, so you can define all your tests on both the data sets. Okay, so that is also possible with your DBT here. Now the third feature is called reusability. Okay, so in DBT, you are going to write 90% of the time all the SQL commands, guys. Okay, so if you use DBT, you should be familiar with SQL. Okay, so SQL is the primary skill to enter into DBT. So not only DBT, any data engineer should know SQL. Okay, so here in DBT with SQL, we are also going to use something called Jinja templates. Okay, so something like this: create table, some curly braces you'll see. Okay, so what does this mean? For example, I wanted to make my code generic. Okay, so for example, I want to create a same table in multiple databases. Okay, in Snowflake, we have different databases for database 2. I wanted to create the same table. So instead of writing the statement multiple times, I will write only one statement and I will assign the variable. Okay, so that this particular code will be executed in multiple databases. Okay, so not only this, for example, I wanted to delete the duplicates for a table. This is very common requirement, right? You should do it for all the tables. Now, what I can do is I can write something called macro in DBT, which is reusable. Okay, so that macro can be used for any table. Just you use employee table, it will remove the duplicates from employee. You use department table, it will remove the duplicates from department table. So we can write our own customized macros to reuse your code also. So it is something like you can think of stored procedures in your databases, right? So stored procedures can be used for reusable code, right? So some repetitive tasks you want to automate using stored procedures, you can do that, right? So similar way, DBT has a feature called macro. Okay, so that macro will be useful for repetitive code or repetitive use cases, and you can reuse the code. Okay, so this is the third top feature of DBT. Okay, and so before coming to the supported data platforms, I also wanted to show you something called data lineage. Okay, so does anyone know what is data lineage? So data lineage will show you where your data is flowing. This is the diagram I was talking about. So let's say you have a table called customers, orders, payment, right? So there is a stage customers table which is using customers table. Stage orders is using orders table. Stage payments is using payments table. Now if you take dim customers, it is using both the tables, orders as well as customers. Whereas fact orders, it is using orders table as well as payments table. Okay, like this, there is something called seeds. Okay, so it shows the entire data flow of your project. Where does this particular lineage graph will be helpful? What is the use of this lineage graph? So you can find the dependencies between different tables. For example, I want to do an impact analysis saying in the customers table, I wanted to drop a column. In which tables will it will impact? It will impact the stage customers. It will impact dim customers. Okay, so not only table level lineage, you can also see column level lineage in DBT. Okay, so they introduced the feature recently, column level lineage. So it also shows you the dependency between your columns or your tables. See here. So this is the column called line item. Okay, so this line item column is becoming TPCH line items in the extended price table. Okay, so this is added very recently. You can see that here. Okay, so you have the column level lineage also. This will be really helpful for us to do the impact analysis. For example, if I remove this column, this will affect here. There is a dependency of the columns, correct? So these kind of things will be really useful in DBT here. Okay, lot of other new features coming from DBT, which will make us life easier. Okay, while developing the code. Okay, so that is why this DBT is becoming really famous with Snowflake, with Databricks, okay, with BigQuery. So these are the supported data warehouses. Not only this, it supports Postgres, it supports Teradata. Okay, so it supports a lot of other platforms also. Okay, so your target can be any of the modern data warehouse using your DBT here. Okay, DBT Core and DBT Cloud. Okay, so DBT Core is an open source version. You can install it on your machine. Okay, DBT Cloud is a paid version, but which is free for 14 days. Okay, and later that 14 days trial is only for 5 developers in parallel. For example, your team is having 5 developers, so you can use the DBT 5 developers for 14 days. After 14 days, a single developer can use for lifetime. So because you are practicing, you don't need to purchase any licensing for DBT Cloud. Okay, so just I will quickly show you how the DBT Cloud looks like. Already I have created an account, but later I will show you how to create it. But now I wanted to show you the glimpse of DBT Cloud UI. Okay. This is where you log in to your DBT Cloud account. So my trial account is expired, so they're asking for choosing the plan. So I was telling you, right, for up to 5 developers, it is free for 14 days. After that, you may need to pay $100 per month. Okay, so I am not going to use this. We are going to see 1 developer seat. Okay, I wanted to downgrade it. So we'll see how to create the account, don't worry. But just I wanted to show you the DBT user interface. So this is the DBT user interface, guys. Now, if you want to develop something, you will go to Studio. Okay. So in the Studio, you'll see some folders called macros, models, seeds, snapshots, right? Target folder. So these are the folders inside DBT. Okay. So DBT is all about understanding these folders. So if you understand what is the purpose of each and every folder here, then the DBT course is done. Okay, so we are going to discuss different folders here. Okay, so we'll try to understand what is a model, what is a macro, what is the link between model and macro, and what is snapshot, what is the link between snapshot and model, right? So all these things we are going to discuss in the future ongoing sessions. But this is how your DBT cloud interface looks like, and it shows, I told you, right, it shows you the lineage from which table to which table the data is flowing. So all this stuff it is going to show you. Okay, so if you want to see the course content, okay, so we are going to see what is EL versus ELT, DBT introduction, usage, right, how to set up the DBT, and we'll see what is models, what are the different materializations, what are pre-hooks and post-hooks, and then have like Jinja templates, macros, snapshots, right? So all this stuff we are going to discuss, and we'll see how to do the testing, how to do the deployment, right? And we are going to see debugging best practices and some interview questions at the end. Okay, so this is what I'm going to discuss as part of our DBT course.